Alexander the Great, he didn't just conquer the world, he changed the order of the earth. This is the equivalent of hitting the reboot button on the historical world computer, if you will. And when he died, the world didn't just mourn, it exploded. His body was more than flesh. It was a crown. It was a political instrument, a weapon. It was, for lack of a better word or words, a god in a box. And whoever controlled Alexander's corpse controlled the future. So Alexander of Macedon was known by many names, and he was considered Alexander the Godlike, or Alexander of Macedon, or even to the Thebans, he was known as the Demon King. But on June 323 BCE, Alexander dies in the great city of Babylon at the age of 32 years old. And in that moment, he leaves no heirs, surrounded by all his companions and closest generals and commanders. Alongside was his Afghan wife named Roxana. And at the time, Roxana was pregnant with Alexander IV, which is Alexander's unborn son. Also present was Philip III of Aridaeus. This was Alexander's half-brother. And according to sources, he was mentally impaired and not fit for rule, if you will. But there's immediate political crisis, right? The Macedonian army that conquered the world demanded unity. And also there present at his deathbed was Perdiccas. This was Alexander's cavalry commander, his most trusted bodyguard. And at that moment, he becomes the regent, right? The temporary ruler of the great empire that Alexander carved out with his Macedonian army. Now, to put some perspective here, he died in Babylon, which is, the epicenter of the world at this time, located in northern Iraq. And Babylon wasn't just a random place. Again, it was a symbolic heart of Alexander's empire, right? It was newly conquered and newly crowned. And an ancient monarchy demanded divine succession. So no heir meant the gods had abandoned the bloodline. And this is a problem, especially a big political problem. So Alexander's association with the god Zeus or the god Ammon from Egypt made his death a cosmic rupture, not just political chaos. Think of it this way. In a world ruled by divine bloodlines, Alexander's corpse wasn't just remains. It was proof of destiny. It decided where the heir was going to go, who was going to rule. It was crucial. Now, his, again, close bodyguard and commander of his companion cavalry, Perdiccas, he's going to organize a funeral procession. So his plan is to take Alexander's body from Babylon all the way to Macedon so he can have a traditional royal burial from his homeland. So think about this trip. He's going to travel with Alexander's body from northern Iraq all the way to Macedonia, which would be, north of Greece. Now, this story has many complex and just awesome, colorful characters. And one of them is Ptolemy. And Ptolemy was also present in Alexander's deathbed and is also a childhood friend and also a general in Alexander's army. Ptolemy was Alexander's closest general. And so he sees a chance. He sees an opportunity to take power. So he wants to seize the body, and he's going to claim the spirit of Alexander as kingship. So to give you some, I guess, context on who Ptolemy became later on after this, 250 years later, Ptolemy's dynasty, the Ptolemaic dynasty, ruled Egypt. And his final heir, if you will, was a historical figure known as Cleopatra. This is the one who had affairs with Mark Antony and Julius Caesar and was either poisoned or died of natural causes, but I lean more towards or suicide. But this goes to show you the effect that the people around Alexander's orbit had 200, almost 300 years later. Now, the funeral rites. So funeral rites in the ancient monarchies weren't just, sentiment. It wasn't just grieving. They were about transferring the legitimacy. Think of it this way, right? Like holy relic logic, if you will. Just like the knights in the Crusades in the 11th and 12th century fought over Christ relics during the Crusades, right? Think of the Knights Templars, if you will, the Crusaders, trying to conquer Jerusalem to take the Holy Church of the Sepulchre, right? This is where they believe is the tomb of Christ's body. So during Alexander's time, again, this is 400 years before Christ, but this is the equivalent of that. Just like the knights, again, who fought in the Crusades for the Christ relics, for a piece of the cross, or, the actual tomb of Christ. Now, Alexander's generals fought over Alexander's divine body, if you will. And Ptolemy, right, being the shrewd and intelligent person he understood the symbolism wins wars before the army even marches. So in monarchy cultures, burying a king was burying his divinity in your soil. Now, in 321 BC, somewhere near Syria, Ptolemy intercepts the funeral procession and he steals Alexander the Great's body. And of course, Ptolemy redirects it straight to Egypt. So he goes to Egypt's most holiest city, Memphis, and Alexander is first buried in Memphis. And later, he's moved to a grand tomb in the city of Alexandria. Now, this wasn't just a crime. This was a declaration of war against all the Diadochi. And the Diadochi was basically all of Alexander's most closest commanders and generals. These were the most efficient and prolific professional killers of the ancient world. And each one of these men in their own right was, absolutely just, you could say, terrifying and glorious when it came to combat and military campaigns and strategy and so forth. So back to Alexander, right? So the tombs in ancient culture were power centers. So think of the pyramids for the pharaohs, for example. These are not just graves, but they're eternal monuments. So Ptolemy wasn't just burying Alexander. He was planting his legacy like a flag in Egyptian soil. Ptolemy didn't need a crown because he stole a god. Now, this is where the fallout begins between, again, the Diadochi, or translated to the successors of Alexander. Perdiccas, Alexander's closest bodyguard and, again, acting regent, is outraged and declares Ptolemy a traitor. So he launches a campaign, puts together an army to go conquer Egypt and the body of Alexander. And this coup, if you will, fails catastrophically because Perdiccas was assassinated by his own officers during the Egypt campaign. So the first war of the Diadochi officially erupts. And Perdiccas, again, he's murdered by mutiny in Egypt. And Ptolemy establishes the Ptolemaic Egypt, the Ptolemaic dynasty, which lasts, again, almost 300 years until the infamous Cleopatra. Of course, there's other characters in this story. People like Cassander, one of Alexander's childhood friends and also close commanders, right? He later murders Alexander IV, which is Alexander's unborn son, and Roxana, the Bactrian or Afghan wife, if you will. And he's the one responsible for ending Alexander's direct bloodline. Then you have other characters like Antigonus One-Eye, and again, one of Alexander's commanders and also his father, Philip II's commander. So Antigonus was an old man, but he was shrewd and he tried to reunite the empire, but he was killed at a place called Ipsus. And you also have like Seleucus of Nicator, which built the Seleucid Empire, right? And he was a successor of the empire in Asia that Alexander left behind. So basically, the men who had once toasted Alexander to Alexander's victories now sharpen their knives against each other. So why did his body matter again? Because Alexander, the legend wasn't just history. It was religion. His corpse wasn't just dead matter. It was a living relic of cosmic authority. And whoever held it controlled memory, myth, and legitimacy. The world wasn't fighting for land. It was fighting for meaning. And again, burying Alexander in his homeland in Macedon would continue or establish the continuity of the royal legitimacy. But burying Alexander in Egypt told the world this was the birth of a new dynasty, if you will, in the Ptolemies in Egypt, that Alexander's soul or his power now rested in Egypt. And since his myth, if you will, was tied to Zeus and Ammon, right? His soul lived through the possession of, or the gods lived through the possession of these remains, if you will. So the wars of the Diadochi weren't just about power. They were about who would carry the blood of Zeus into the next age. Alexander the Great, he built an empire by conquering men, and his corpse built empires by conquering memory. The wars of the Diadochi weren't just battles. They were a funeral procession or funeral rituals, if you will, for a god who left no heir. And every man who touched his name bled for it. So I hope you guys enjoyed the story. And like always, remember to lift more, eat more, rest more, love more, hate less, and stay tuned for parts 2 and 3 of the Wars of the Diadochi.